Welcome back to the Cream City Club podcast. You are listening to episode number 43. I am Spencer Michaelis, and I'm here once again with Gunnar Amelunk. Gunnar, how are you doing tonight?
Not too bad. I think this part of the podcast always turns into a weekend recap at this point. So I went to the zoo. That was about the most eventful thing I did. So what did you do, Spencer? And how was your day today?
Yeah, spent some time with family on Mother's Day and saw some people I hadn't seen in a while, so that's always good. But otherwise pretty uneventful weekend, which was nice. It was kind of my first weekend without baseball in a while, so I got to watch all the Brewer games. I got to
True.
sit down instead of doing stuff the whole time. So I didn't hate having an uneventful weekend. And then of course I'm in the midst of jury duty right now, so not my favorite start to the week, but otherwise things are going fine. For those of you listening, if you haven't yet subscribed, please take a moment to do so on whatever platform you are on and to rate us 5 stars. Follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod to stay up to date on these episode releases. And today's going to be another Brewers focused episode. I think we're gonna have a Bucks recap of the season at some point here soon. We're still working up the strength to talk about them, I think, but we're getting close to being able to do that. So we'll have one of those soon. But today is going to be another Brewers episode. So Gunnar, what do we got coming up?
We're going to be recapping the Cardinals series, that four-game series. The Brewers won three out of four games. We also had a pretty nice streak there until Sunday where we had eight straight wins against the Cardinals, which was the most in our history of playing them, which was pretty cool. And we almost snuck that one out at the end, but cannot do that. But we'll talk all about that. Throughout before these four games and after the four games, we'll have injury and roster updates that have happened in the last week or so. And then we'll wrap it up with some of our bigger picture discussion questions, just to give you a little bit of a tease what we'll be talking about. Maybe our young outfielder struggling. Maybe Yelich's return we'll talk about. William Contreras' emerges into stardom. Who knows? But all not limited to those topics, but plenty more too. But before these first four games, we had a bigger roster news to talk about with Christian Yelich was back in last podcast. If you listened to it, hopefully you did. We discussed who might be going down for Christian Yelich. We had pretty much consensus decided on that it's probably going to be Oliver Dunn, at least to our liking that it would be that case, but it ended up being Tyler Black. Spencer, obviously we're happy Christian Yelich is back, so we don't need to get too much into that part of it because we're super happy he's back. But are you surprised that it ended up being Tyler Black, being the one that was sent down?
Somewhat, but also when they said that Yelich is probably going to be DHing a decent amount, it makes sense. It's just the Brewers already have two guys who are you would prefer them to be DHing the majority of the time, and that's Rhys Hoskins and Gary Sanchez. Tyler Black has not shown an ability to play first base very well yet, so him just slotting in at first anyway is already pretty difficult to do. And then you add in that Yelich is going to be taking DH at bats, and you don't really want to take Rhys out of the lineup, which means he's going to have to play a decent amount of first. Those are kind of the two spots Black is slotted into right now. So it makes it difficult to actually find playing time for him. And the last thing you want is a top prospect in the majors not playing regularly, which we'll talk about a certain prospect who hasn't been playing super regularly lately. But in terms of Black, I think it makes more sense for him to go down to AAA right now and just get regular at bats and most likely have gotten some feedback from the team on things he needs to work on, maybe some ideas on how to work on them. Just getting to be around the big league staff and the big league team, and then getting to go down there and work on what he's lacking in right now, which is mostly defense, but also I think he's going to have to get used to a slightly bigger zone in MLB than what they have in AAA because of that automatic balls and strikes. And he has such a good eye that he went down on some pitches that were absolutely balls, but in MLB, he probably will have to get used to trying to fight him off or doing something with him, which sucks. It shouldn't be that way, but it is right now. So I don't know. I know a lot of people are upset, and I get it. He didn't exactly tear the cover off the ball while he was up. He had the good first game, and I think he might have had one hit afterwards. So it's not like you were sending down a guy who was batting 400 in his time up here. He showed a good approach. He showed the ability to hit the ball hard. He showed exactly what you're looking for, but he also didn't really do it super consistently. It was a small sample no matter what. Let him go to AAA and work on things. And then once Yelich is more prepared to play the outfield almost every game, then it becomes more likely that we see Black back in MLB at some point. But yeah, Ollie Dunn gets to dodge the bullet for now, I think, because of that. But he's also got to be pretty close to being on the chopping block. But what were your thoughts, Gunner?
Yeah, I remember last episode when I was walking through just the math of it, and as you talked about with Yelich coming back, probably strictly being DH mostly, and they specifically said Tyler Black's going to be first base DH, and then you start doing the math, like, okay, well, Jake Bauers has been there. He's also playing outfield, which they didn't give the option for Tyler Black, which um, we'll talk about that later with our young guys struggling out there. Um, that would have been nice to maybe see Tyler Black out in the outfield, but I know he hasn't had that opportunity anyway, so that wasn't really an option regardless. But maybe for the future, that would be a nice option to have. But yeah, I mean, it sucks that he got sent down, but I figured that maybe he would just be kept because, as you mentioned, you figure that he's got to play. So if you brought him up for a reason, I thought maybe he would just stick for that reason and somehow it would work out. But like you mentioned too, the other side of that is he has to play. So if there wasn't a window there, then he should be going on the AAA and getting those at bats. And yeah, he didn't have a great sample size when he was up here. It was 20 at bats or whatever it was, but pretty much all of his batted ball data and everything else was probably worse than the lineup at that point. But he obviously wasn't penalized for that or anything like that. But I expect him to be up soon. Once, like you said, Yelich is being his normal self and everything else gets worked out. But yeah, I guess that could lead us into game one here of the Cardinals series. Brewers played against Sonny Gray, who was having a good season. He got called up or not called up. I think he must have been injured or something um, earlier in the year, but he's only had like 30 innings coming into this one, but had like an under one ERA coming in, and he was pitching super well for them. And the Brewers maybe escaped a little bit of, well, we didn't escape the drama. We got out of some jams there because I believe it was a ground ball by, I don't remember who it was, maybe Willie Adames to third base, and he could have got tagged out at third.
Yep.
For Yelich, or no, it would have been Contreras avoided the tag at third base. So if that happens, then we get no runs that inning, but then it ended up being one of the next pitches was a pass ball. We score on that, and then that gives the opportunity for Reese to hit a 2-run home run. So you swing that to go from 0 runs to 3 runs, and that's looking pretty good when you're facing Sonny Gray. And then we're able to scrape across another run in the next inning with a Jake Powers home run, who's been hitting the ball super well as of late for sure. As I might have mentioned before, maybe a reason why he was in the chopping block for some reason with a lot of fans, but it seems like he's been the most steady increasing out of everybody in this lineup. For guys who maybe have started out bad, or multiple guys who are trending downwards, he's probably the one guy who's been trending up, which is good to see. And then we also got a Joey Ortiz homer. He's been obviously awesome. He's been consistently hitting the ball harder. We were just begging for him to hit it more up in the air and harder, and it seems like this last week, and so he's been able to do that. But this was the last time that we did see Tobias Myers, maybe for a little bit. We a little foreshadowing. We got sent down after this game, but had a little bit better of a start. But Spencer, what did you see out of Tobias Myers? If this is his last time that you ever see him in your life pitching for the Brewers, even though I'm sure it won't be.
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if it is, but I do think the biggest difference was that he was able to come out in the first inning with his good fastball. Seems like he's been coming out of starting most games with like 90 to 91 on the fastball, and that makes it a lot more hittable than 94, 95, even 93. So he came out and he was able to get outs early. Obviously, he gave up the homer in the third, I believe, and honestly, that wasn't even a bad pitch. It was probably a little too far down, but for the most part, it was up and in, and I think he just did a good job getting the barrel to it. Nootbaar, on a side note here, Nootbaar is kind of the guy I'm hoping the Cardinals make their next, give up too early on an outfielder move on, because I think Nootbaar is going to be really good, and I'm hoping they give up on him after this. He's had a slow start. If he has a bad season, I'm really hoping the Cardinals do the same thing they've done a few times recently, which is just throw him to the wayside and say, all right, time to move on and find somebody else. But Myers has the stuff to start in MLB. He has it 100%. I have no doubt in my mind about that. He also has shown solid command at times, but he loses it for an inning at a time. It's almost always one inning where he just loses it. And I know it's hard to remember these days of the Woodruff and the Peralta and the Burns era when that's what they were. Like, they were all better pitchers than Myers is currently. Like, all of them were higher tier pitchers than Myers is right now. But for the most part, their struggle was the big inning. They would have one big inning almost every start, and the one time they could avoid it, they had a really good outing. Like that was always how it would go, and they learned how to get past that and how to get through it and at least limit the damage in that inning. Like give up 2 runs instead of 4 makes a big difference in the long run. But in this game, obviously, Jared Koenig was able to bail Myers out of what was going to be potentially a really big inning with the bases loaded, nobody out, and Koenig comes in and goes through 2, 3, 4 in the Cardinals order without allowing a run. That was a really big moment in this game because it was 4-1, looking like it was about to be, I mean, potentially tied. Potentially they'd take the lead. And after that, the Brewers just, I mean, they were just smoking the ball off Gray in this game. We obviously talked about Ortiz hit the homer then. Yelich had his triple, but there were so many hard hit outs in this game too. Like the Brewers were just smoking the ball, and Gray even said as much in his post game, which by the way, if you haven't listened to it, it's pretty interesting. He takes a ton of blame for stuff, which I've always respected, and I know Yankees fans hated him, but he was always one to stand in front of the cameras and take the blame for struggles, which I have a lot of respect for players who are willing to do that rather than throw out a reason why something happened. It's just he kept saying, well, they just were smoking the ball against me. He's like, I felt like my fastball was doing what it's supposed to do, and they just weren't missing it. And they really just, I mean, the whole team was just hitting the ball hard. I do want to talk about Yelich's triple, though, quickly, because that to me was one of his best all around at bats I'd seen in a long time for him because he goes up 2-0. He takes a huge hack at the 2-0 fastball, and the fastball is like a borderline top of the zone pitch. It clipped the zone, but it would have been a borderline strike. It might have been called a ball, but it was a 2-0 fastball that he just took a hack at. And like, I love when he does that. That means he's in a good mode right there when he's really trying to impact the ball on 2-0. 2-1, he gets the curveball and he just barely misses it foul. I mean, like 10 feet foul, but he hit it 400 feet. It was crushed. Sonny Gray throws a absolutely perfect changeup just below the zone on the next pitch. Yelich barely budges, takes it for ball 3, and then he throws a cutter up and in, and he just pulls the barrel to it and gets the barrel to it and stays inside of it and hits it down the line. And it almost looked like a jam shot live, but he hit it 96 miles per hour. Like he hit the ball pretty hard. That was just to me like everything you want from him, where he's taking these big swings in hitters' counts. He's able to lay off of a really, really good pitch on 2-2. Like Sonny Gray probably was thrilled with how he landed that pitch. And then the cutter up and in, Gray barely threw any cutters all game. And I bet he felt really good about where he threw that pitch too. And Yelich just did the job. And that to me is one of the best signs that he looks really good right now. And that was my favorite at bat from him probably since the 18-19 seasons that I can remember off the top of my head, because it just felt like every single thing he did in that at bat was the exact right way to attack the at bat. And that you're not going to get that all the time. Hitters are going to get fooled. They're going to have things. Once in a while, you just get a little anxious, whatever. But every single thing he did in that at bat was like a guy who looked super locked in. And we'll talk about it throughout the next 3 games. But he is not slowed down in terms of hitting the ball hard since coming back. In fact, he's doing it pretty much the exact same clip he was. He hasn't been able to elevate one for a homer yet since he returned, but he looks really good. And that at bat was just really, really exciting for me. But other highlight, I mean, William Contreras is just absolutely unbelievable so far this year. Another smoked single for that last run. And yeah, you just don't see Sonny Gray give up 6 earned runs very often. In fact, he had given up 3 earned runs in the first 30 innings, like you were talking about coming into the season. So to put up a 3 spot in the first inning and then another 3 as they just continued to pound the ball off him, I mean, that was a really impressive offensive showing. And like I mentioned, Koenig was able to bail out Myers to make it so that it ended up being not much of a game, but we got to see another Thiago Vieira closing out a game with a nice lead, and him getting all pumped up and excited about every single thing that he does, and that's always fun. So yeah, game one was good, and game 2 didn't lag but far behind. I was able to finally attend another Brewer game. I hadn't been able to go since I think the first homestand of the season, if the Mariners were in that homestand, but it's been a while. It's been at least 3 or 4 weeks, and I had to go see Robert Gasser's debut. and that went a lot better than I was expecting it to. I'm not gonna lie. I was not anticipating six shutout. Now, I should say the Cardinals they've been horrible against left-handed pitching this year, like really, really bad. So it couldn't have been much of a better setup for him to make his debut. It was a pretty good lineup for him to face, especially with some of the middle of the order guys for the Cardinals struggling so far, but he just looked really good. And I was in the bleachers, and obviously that gives me a different angle than the people on TV had, but you could just tell that the sweeper was just completely fooling them every time he threw it. Lefties had no shot against it. He was backdooring it really well against righties for strikes. That's going to be the pitch. The rest of the pitches are all pretty, they're okay. Um, I was surprised at the sinker usage over the cutter, but hard to argue with the results. So maybe that'll work a little better for him in MLB than it did at AAA. That it wouldn't be the first time. The baseballs can sometimes be slightly different in between, and sometimes that means the fastballs play a little differently than they do in AAA. But he was fantastic. I mean, six shutout, two hits, no walks. He did hit one batter, but four strikeouts, and just a really, really good debut. One we haven't really seen in a while from a starter. We've had some rough debuts for starting pitchers recently. I mean, Myers did well in his Pittsburgh one, but you think about Ashby, Small was okay, I guess, but mostly you think about Ashby, I guess, which is pretty brutal. But for the most part, they haven't gone great. But you think back, I believe Woodruff was the last person to go six or more shutout innings in their debut. So it had been a while. We're talking 2017 for that. So really good start for him. Gunner, what were your thoughts? I don't know how much of that one you got to catch, or if you were able to pay too much attention to it. But obviously, we had the Gasser news or the Gasser debut. We had three doubles from Willie Adames, who continues to hit really well to start the year. Contreras, of course, with another double, and Terang with another double, who also just continues to hit. So yeah, it was. I mean, I didn't even mention 11-2 final. Kevin Herget gets the last three innings, and should mention that is a save. He got a save for closing that game out, even though he entered with a pretty big lead. I guess it was only 7-0 at the time when the Brewers added on four in the seventh. But yeah, one of my favorite stats is the 3 inning save in a blowout, because nobody ever remembers them. But Kevin Herget has a save for the Brewers, and I will hopefully be able to use that in my trivia knowledge down the road. But Connor, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, for people who, well, I mean, they wouldn't know, but I was supposed to go to this game with Spencer, and I acquired a new golf bag, so I had to go pick that up. And I had to rewatch a lot of this one, but was updating myself on my phone because, like you said, I was excited about Robert Gasser. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the sweeper. I just like you, I thought nothing else really blew me away about him outside of he had like good location, which maybe that's what we're expecting right now with our pitchers. It's a little bit of the bare minimum when it comes to that. Just someone who competes. But the sweeper to me was the one that's like, he made a lot of lefties look really dumb with the sweeper and ones that weren't even that close. And I remember months ago when I talked about his arm angle when again, I don't know nearly as much as you do, but I mentioned like a little bit of a Josh Hader arm angle, which is not the same stuff, not the same quality of stuff, all that, but it's very hard to read coming out of the hand. I can imagine as a left-handed hitter. I'm not a lefty, but um, even as a righty, it's kind of scary. You feel like you're gonna get a ball right in your chest if the way it's coming at you. But yeah, I was super impressed with him. We ended up scoring a lot of runs, like you mentioned, and laid out there, but it took us 4 innings or so, and it was back and forth. And he was pitching so well, you just felt like, can we just scrape across a couple of runs for him so we can let him breathe a little bit? And then we did get Rhys Hoskins, so another timely hit from him, which he's been awesome with the timely hits. And that's, again, you mentioned Yelich throughout this series, him as well. Um, those are just really my two biggest ones from this game, but. Having Gasser be a mainstay now in the rotation with a little bit more of a guy you can rely on, with some of the other names that we've got, I just think that's going to go a long way for us this the rest of the season, hopefully. And I mean, I expect him to stick. I assume expect him to stick as well. I can't imagine it's going to be another up and down scenario with him. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah,
I would expect him to stay up now. I do want to warn people, like, to let's ease off the gas pedal a little bit on the expectations for him, because a great start, yes, but like I mentioned, that Cardinals offense is pretty inept against
yeah,
left-handed pitchers, and that makes it a lot easier. And there's been plenty of good first starts that lead into some rough second starts and third starts because the league starts to get the book out on you and they have a little bit more knowledge of you now. Obviously, they knew what he could do in AAA and everything, but there's better video in MLB. There's better like they'll have more opportunities to try and pick things up on him now that he's shown himself on an MLB mound. So I think Robert Gasser is going to stick, and I think he's going to be a solid starter for the Brewers and probably for the rest of this year. Even he was always kind of the starter prospect who felt like the most likely to come up and be able to impact the game right away, impact the team right away positively. But I would not expect 6 shutout innings every time out. Just there's going to be some bumps in the road. He's a guy who's probably going to give up some home runs, so be prepared for that. It's just the way the fastball works. It's going to leave the yard sometimes, and that's just part of it. But he definitely has the command and the stuff to be able to stick and to be able to perform right away, which is not it's not an easy thing to do for any starter. It's we saw Paul Skeens debut. He did really well. He had really good stuff, but he still struggled to get outs at times because command was a little iffy. And when you make mistakes to major league hitters, a lot of them will just make you pay for it. And the Cubs were able to do that a few times. So it's not easy to pitch in MLB, and it's a very good start, but just I don't want people getting over their skis about him. Like, let's let him settle into MLB and see where he's at in like a few weeks here, where things end up then. But game 1 and 2 went really well, and game 3 was not looking great. I'm not gonna lie for most of it. The Brewers got out to an early lead off of a hit by pitch with the bases loaded. The Brewers were pretty much relying on bases loaded hit by pitches to get them through this one for a while. They jumped out to that lead. Then the Cardinals were able to take a 2-1 lead on a Lars Nootbaar single. Like I said, Nootbaar always scares me a little bit. And then Nolan Gorman came up in the sixth and doubled to bring the lead to 3-1. That was a ball. Felt like Sal had a really tough time getting out of the corner, and it didn't seem like something Ivan Herrera should have been able to score on, but it took Sal a while to gather it. And as much as I laud Turang's defense, the arm is not exactly great. So he didn't have much on his throw home either, and Herrera was able to get in for that 3-1 lead, and then the Brewers came back and said, hey, you know what we can do? We can get hit by pitches with the bases loaded, and we're going to do it again. Gary Sanchez took it this time, and that was a pretty big missed opportunity in general because that, I believe, was bases loaded, nobody out to begin. I know Churio came up, pinch hit in that spot. Interesting, to say the least, to me that he was being basically taught a lesson is how Murphy was describing it, and that lesson was you're going to pinch hit after not playing for 4 games in the biggest spot of the game. Pretty tough spot to be in, but also I actually thought he had a pretty good at bat, and he ended up getting fooled on a backdoor slider on 3-2. That's pretty tough with the bases loaded. You're probably not thinking, especially as a rookie, that they're going to throw you a breaking ball there. So it was a decent at bat. It wasn't terrible, but luckily the Brewers did end up getting bailed out because nobody else could do anything. And Gary Sanchez did get hit on the leg with that pitch. But then the big blow came in the 7th inning when it was again kind of looking like the Brewers were going to miss an opportunity. They weren't exactly putting together great at bats. And it was 2nd and 3rd, 2 outs. 3-2 count to Rhys Hoskins, who had just fouled off a pitch barely. Like, he just barely got the end of the bat on it. And then he took it deep to center. And boy, did I not think that ball was getting out the whole time. I was watching Siani track it on TV. Like, if I was at the game in the bleachers, I probably could have judged the trajectory and been like, okay, that's getting over unless he robs it. But I thought Siani had it the entire time watching on TV. And then he jumped. I thought he still might have caught it for a split second because it disappeared behind the wall right away. But 3-run homer, give the Brewers a 5-3 lead, and that was off Andrew Kittredge, who's been really good this year. Really, really tough on righties with his sinker slider combo, and that was just a huge, huge hit. So you mentioned that timely hitting from Rhys, but in general, Rhys has just been really, really good. I know I've seen a lot of people mention, and I've heard some talk radio and some people talking about how his batting average was hovering around, 200 for a while, which, listen, there are points where batting average, like a 200 hitter has to hit for power. There's no in between. Like, you can't be a 200 hitter and have a little bit of power. You do have to hit for power if you're hitting 200. Rhys Hoskins is hitting for plenty of power. This was his 9th home run on that swing, and he's currently sitting there with a 130 WRC plus. So 30% above league average, as good as he's been almost any season. at the big league level. In fact, for a full season, it would be his best number over the course of over the course of a real full season. He's never really done it. The COVID year, he was at 139, and then his rookie year in 50 games, he was at 158. But otherwise, he's been in the 120 range, and he clearly seems to be doing the exact same thing right now. So I guess my question, Gunnar, do you feel like the Brewers are getting the bang for their buck that they were hoping for from Reese?
But we're getting more than what we paid for our buck there. I should have mentioned him with Jake Bauers as guys who have been elevating recently. It seems like Reese has been so consistent, but really like over the last week or so, has 3 home runs, 9 RBIs, almost 800 slugging percentage, 1200 OPS. So, and then Jake Bauers, 1500 OPS. So he's been really good. But yeah, I mean, I mentioned that steadiness in the lineup. That's why it feels like he's just always himself. Like it's just a really nice calming presence to have. And when you add Yelich to that mix too, a guy who's just going to consistently be 800-ish OPS, 850 OPS, 900 OPS, but something that we've been missing for a long time in this lineup for sure. So, and yeah, the timely hitting. I mean, that's maybe a stat where. You'll never be able to point to it really. I mean, I don't want to mention Ryan Braun again. You can't point to those type of stats, but he seems like a guy who is in that sort of realm where I always will trust him in one of those spots. He always wants that moment. And with how many young guys that we have in this team, guys who are struggling, um, I mean, him, Willie, Yelich, I mean, those are, and then William Contreras, of course, who we think is maybe a superstar now in this
Yeah.
league, but um, that's four guys who I really, really trust. And I mean, you can go through all the baseball savant stats if you want with him, but I mean, he's far and away blown me away at this point. So yeah, I'm just really excited about him. But weirdly enough, I wanted honestly to mention the bullpen in this one too. And Freddie started this one. He's been really, really excellent. I checked his baseball savant page before, might have been right after his start. I don't know what day it was, but he's got like 85 the average exit velocity is getting up. I remember off the top of my head somewhere there. So super, super good. That's like an outlier for the Brewers staff. I don't even think anyone's even close to allowing that type of soft contact. So and that's when I think of Freddie, I feel like that's maybe gonna be he always if he does struggle, it seems like he just gets himself either in the walks or it's the home run ball somehow, or it's just
Hmm.
maybe a little more unluckiness with him, but overall consistency wise and stuff, he's just excellent. So, wasn't his best outing for sure, but more of a Freddie outing, I think, in my opinion. But then with the bullpen that I wanted to mention, Milner continuing to be good. He's on the rise. He's getting a lot of work, it seems like recently too. Brian Hudson is going to be maybe another one of our um, uh, I'm trying to think of the word. I mean, we think of guys like
Under the
Bryce
radar.
Wilson, yes, like Bryce Wilson last year.
Yeah.
He's going to be the guy like that this year, where under the radar is maybe the best word. So, um, right now, I mean, under one ERA. Trevor McGill under one ERA. So those are two guys that are just absolutely killing it right now. And McGill is in a way our closer if we even need to have a closer. It seems like he's really embraced that role, but um, two, three guys right there that's not even part of. I mean, Milner you probably would have expected to be in those higher leverages spots, but those other two guys you really wouldn't expect. But maybe what have you seen of our bullpen recently that's maybe giving you some more hope and specifically maybe with those three guys? Because like I said, it seems like Milner's getting a lot of work, but he seems to be rising up to the occasion. It seems like
Oh
the
yeah.
more work that he gets.
Yeah. I mean, Hobie seems like the rubber arm of the whole bullpen. Like he's always been able to just kind of go, go, go and not need many days off. And it probably helps that he doesn't throw super hard and that he mostly relies on, smoke and mirrors in a way to get outs. But after a slow start, it's been really good to see him get going because he was struggling early on. Hudson has just been absolutely fantastic. 8 feet of extension on his fastball is just making it play like he's throwing in the mid to upper 90s with this really. I mean, it's a weird angle. He's like the only person in baseball who has as much extension and as far out, like width wise, like horizontally. His release point is crazy too. And then McGill, just really, really good stuff. I mean, all three of these guys Milner was a minor league free agent when we signed him. McGill was a trade for a player to be named later for a very small minor league price to pay. And then Brian Hudson was a 20th round pick from last year's draft traded for him. So the Brewers have found a lot of value in their bullpen by means of just really small moves that paid off really big. But before we move to game 4 here, I do quickly want to ask you, I want to go back to what you were talking about with Jake Bauers because I did see Jake McKibben, a Brewer fanatic, tweet this out a couple days ago, and I got a few updated numbers just to try and it was a few days old, so I wanted to try and make it a little bit more up to date. But Jake Bauers went to a toe tap on May 5th. He had been doing obviously a pretty big leg kick before that. He had quite a bit of it seemed like he had a lot of movement going on at the time. And it's a small sample. Like I said, this is about a week we're talking about worth of games. He's only seen 25 pitches in that time. So he's only had about 7.5% of the total pitches he's seen this entire season. But I shouldn't say that. That's balls in play. But he's only put 25 balls in play since then out of 340 prior to that. And in that time, Bauers has a 12.5% strikeout rate, which is obviously way down from the 37-ish that it's at right now. It was at 40 before the toe tap. His whiff rate is 20%, which is down quite a bit, and actually puts him, I mean, he was in the almost mid 30s before this. He's at 30.7% right now for the season. His average exit velocity is 96.7. Now he's been hitting the ball hard all season, but that's still up about 7 miles per hour over his season long stats. He's swinging. We've got the new bat speed averages, and he's swinging the bat at 75.1 miles per hour on average during this stretch. It's at 73.9 for the season, although that's probably dragged up a little bit by the recent stats. So up almost a couple miles per hour pretty much on average. Now, again, there's a lot of noise to that. That's a new stat we're going to learn a little bit more about as we go, but it is interesting to me that he's able to generate potentially a little bit more bat speed during that too. And then his hard hit rate is 57.1% in that time, which it's 42.2 for the season, which is solid, no problem. But that's a really, really big jump. And his sweet spot percentage was already really, really good this year. His sweet spot rate, it's at 48.9 for the season, which is in the 99th percentile, but he's been even doing it more often since he went to this toe tap. So he's making way more contact. He's still hitting the ball hard and in the air when he is making contact. Gunnar, I know in the past you've talked about how you don't care leg lift, leg kick, toe tap, whatever. I know for you, you liked the leg kick. That was something you were comfortable with. Is this just a matter of a hitter doing whatever is most comfortable for him? Do you think there's legitimate advantage for everyone to be doing a leg kick, or is it just a matter of a preference of comfortability for a hitter?
I don't really care what you do. Obviously, it's very success dependent on, but I feel like it's really tools based for me too. Like I remember I'm trying to get into my coaching brain of people who had toe taps, and I told them to do the opposite thing because maybe they didn't have enough power, and I'm trying to get them to free it up a little bit more and create a little bit more power. Um, but I think with guys, and I'm in my head, if we want to relate it to the Brewers team right now, I feel like Blake Perkins kind of has a toe tap. Maybe it's not exactly a toe tap. I'd have to break it down a little bit more, but he has more of a stationary feet with his swing a little bit more. And he's a guy who doesn't hit the ball very hard, and we're seeing how it's not equating to really much success. Now, it's not exactly because of a toe tap, but um, I would want to switch it up with him to be like, if okay, maybe try doing the opposite because we need to get you some more power. But with Jake Bauers, he has all the power, he has all the everything that you need tools wise, but what you're trying to do is get him to make more contact because he's hitting the ball hard. So it's a way to simplify it, really. I mean, that's one less thing to think about. If your timing's just off a little bit with a leg kick or whatever it is, and I can imagine in the MLB too, if it's a little bit too crazy of a leg kick, that mindfully with some off-speed pitches and everything else, something that we didn't even have to worry about when we're in college and whatnot. But I mean, for Jake, it was very obvious: stop striking out as much, don't whiff as much. How do we get you to this to try to work off of something kind of like a Bryce Terang, even though he's got a little bit more of a toe tap and his numbers are a little mumbo jumbo right now. I don't really know what to believe with him, but he's having success. So he's did that in the similar way of, um, let's try to get you more success and something to work off of. But with Jake, I think you're going to see these bigger numbers having success. I don't imagine a 1500 OPS the rest of the season, but it's something to work off of now because now you're working off of how to make contact, and just putting yourself in better positions. But um, I mean, like I think we saw Yelich do it a couple times, honestly, too, in the recent years.
Yeah,
I would say
he's still toe
normally,
tapping.
yeah, he still does it. So,
Yeah,
and he's found a way to. We saw when he had the big power, and then he had a Jake Bauers turn where okay, you're whiffing a little too much now, and now you're not making the contact. How do we do that? And then same thing with him, but then you didn't see the power as much. But now he's found a way to make the timing a little bit better, to make everything a little bit more smoother. And now he has more power, and it makes all a bit more sense. So I think it's going to be a similar thing with Jake Bauers. I mean, he's showing power already, so it seems
hmm
that he's already surpassed that point of it as well. Um, but yeah, I think normally I don't really care about it, but like I said, it's very tools dependent. So, um, Keston here, I hate to bring him up too. He had a toe tap, but he also had a big leg kick, and I know he tried a couple different
and
things,
with
but
all of them.
yeah, he had like a toe tap leg kick, which whatever. But that would have been a guy too if he had a toe tap and he had a huge leg kick. If you said, okay, let's just make more contact now, that would be someone I wanted to switch to or something like that. But um, I think it's those two things, like you mentioned, Jake's article. That has to be a direct correlation for sure because we saw what it looked like when it was just a leg kick and it wasn't good. So,
Yeah,
just trying to put him in better spots, I guess, is maybe the best way to wrap it up. So,
yeah.
um, I would recommend it for a guy like him.
Okay, yeah. I do think to me the most important part of hitting is timing. And I've said that before. I
Hmm.
say that from a pitcher's perspective too. I think if you can mess with timing, you can beat them regardless of where you locate it, regardless of the pitch, because if you have them off timing, they're not going to make good, solid contact, or they're going to have to slow down to do it, or whatever. So to me, if you can be on time, that is the biggest thing for a hitter. And if that means leg kick, if that means toe tap, whatever it takes, I think just seeing him on time more often is what we're seeing right now. And it's so far had really, really good results. So I'm excited because I was a guy who's been believing in him coming into the season. William Contreras just flew one just short, hit it to the warning track. Um, but I do think Bowers is on track for. I think he's figured some things out, and I think we're going to start seeing. He's like you said, it's not going to be a 1500 OPS, and he's still going to have some struggles. But right now, he looks like a much better hitter, and with the defense he plays at first base, the fact that he is, I mean, he's currently carrying a 115 WRC plus overall. Like that's absolutely playable for anybody. He does need to strike out less, and that'll be important as we move forward here. But I do feel pretty good about where Bowers is at right now, and I think the toe tap is definitely helping. But we'll quickly go through this Mother's Day game. That one did not go very well. Um, Brewers obviously jumped out to an early 3-0 lead on the back of just a couple. I mean, it was mostly single, just kind of hitting the ball through holes. There wasn't anything super special in that inning, but Gary Sanchez, I want to ask you on this one because it was iffy at the time, it felt like. And Gary Sanchez, line drive to left, 2 outs, right? Willie Adames scores, and then Rhys Hoskins is the trail runner from second base, and it was a good throw from left, and they got Rhys out at the plate. It's tough because I think in most circumstances I would agree with this send from Lane, even though it's Rhys, because it did take a throw right on the money to get him. If it's up the line either direction, he's going to be safe. But Michaelis is sitting at 45 pitches, I believe, at that point. He's clearly struggling. He's walked a bunch of people. He's giving up hits left and right. You almost have a chance to give him like the death blow there by making him continue to throw pitches. Obviously, that ends the inning. And I believe he had 3 different innings where he threw single digit pitches after that. And he was able to get through 6 innings. So hindsight makes it obvious that it was the wrong send. But let's say without hindsight, looking at it just from the process, are you okay with that send? Did you agree with the send in the moment? Would you have held him?
I didn't agree with it, honestly. I mean, Reese is a slow runner on top of it, but it seems
Yeah.
like with two outs, we know how Jason Lane handles his third base duties. So it seems like he almost predetermines a lot of these things sometimes. Um, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have sent him, I guess, like you said, pitch count wise. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, you're trying to put the pressure on as most as you can. It wasn't even like a hit that got him off balance in the left field or had him on going to his left or right. It was directly right at him where he was able to get a good throw off to home plate. And it didn't take much to get Reese out. So, and we know that it wouldn't take much. So, it seems like you're just maybe banking on a bad throw or something, just for, again, for how the hit ended up playing out. But, yeah, like you said, hindsight, it didn't look great either. But maybe you're expecting more of an offensive day, but like you said, that could have been the death blow in the first inning, and we could have sat on that the rest of the
Yep.
game. And it turns out that we needed more offense the rest of the game too. So, yeah, it was not a good look for us.
Yeah. Well, after that, Bryce Wilson just completely fell apart. I shouldn't even say after that. He had a terrible first inning. He was able to get out of it scoreless, but he was not looking good at any point during the start. Now, the final line is unbelievable, in my opinion. I don't think I've ever seen anything I don't know how he ended up giving 2 earned runs in 4 innings while allowing 5 hits and 5 walks. 10 base runners in 4 innings, and you only give up 2 earned runs, and one of those was a solo home run. So that was just mind blowing to me. I don't even want to give him credit for like battling through. I straight up think he got super lucky in this outing and was able to limit it to 2 by pure luck. Um, Unfortunately, Paul Goldschmidt, who had been absolutely just struggle bus to the max, 0 for 32 at one point. He got a hit against McGill in game 3 in the ninth inning. You just knew he was probably about to start hitting the ball because he's Paul Goldschmidt. He's playing the Brewers. He's naturally going to do that. He had a chance in the second inning with the bases loaded after Bryce Wilson had already walked in a run, and he flew out to right. He was like, man, maybe he still is gonna just not be the Paul Goldschmidt we're used to. And then, of course, the next time up, he hit a solo home run off of Wilson, made it 3-2 at the time. Bryce came out. Jared Koenig was able to get out of a little bit of a jam again. Koenig then pitched the next inning, and honestly, Jared Koenig was still fine in that inning. He ended up giving up a run on what do you know, but a on another Paul Goldschmidt single to end up taking the lead or to tie the game, I should say. But that wasn't a bad pitch. That was a ground ball that snuck through short and third. So I can't really blame Koenig for anything that happened in that inning. He gave up a single. He gave up an infield single with 2 outs, which ended up being the really big one. Lars Nootbaar. It wasn't a play that should have been made or anything. Willie Adames kind of had to, but it was just a cheap hit. And then, of course, another little grounder sneaks through, and it's a tie game. And then Churio made a really nice play in right with the bases loaded after catcher's interference by Gary Sanchez loaded the bases. Churio made a diving catch. Not the most difficult play in the world, but it was a good play, a tough kind of sinking line drive towards the line. So that kept it tied at the time. And the Brewers just, like you said, they just did not hit. They could not hit after that first inning. And the Cardinals Ivan Herrera feels like he's going to be a pain in the Brewers' butt for a long time now because he just was on base every time I checked in during this series. He singled to start the inning. There was a ground into a force out, so Herrera gets taken off the bases. Brandon Crawford strikes out, and then Michael Ciani, who had not hit at all this year, ended up hitting what I thought was absolutely gone at the time. Somehow it hit that yellow padding and bounced back in, and it was not a home run, but Donovan scored from first. Ciani ended up being thrown out at third on the play by a really good relay throw from Adames, but that gave them the lead in the seventh, and Brewers really did not do anything after that short of a Bryce Terang single. They didn't have another base runner, and then Sal Frelick came in to pinch hit for Blake Perkins in the ninth, and I mean, can't say I had much confidence in Sal at the time. He didn't even have that horrible of an at bat by any means, but ended up going down on like a looping line drive to center field, and that was it. But like Gunnar mentioned at the beginning of the show, that was 8 in a row against the Cardinals, and sucks to lose a game you probably had a pretty good chance to win in that fourth game. But listen, that's baseball. It happens. You take 8 out of 9 against the Cardinals. I'm not complaining about the one loss. That would just be asinine. That'd be ridiculous to do that. So I think you come out of that series feeling really good again, just like we have for most of the time this season. It's been a lot of good so far. And then I guess some good news. Yoel Payamps missed that whole, maybe not the whole series. He was available for game one, I think, but he was on the bereavement list with obviously, hopefully everything's okay with his family and everything, but he was reinstated before tonight's game. We're recording on Monday the 13th, and Jansen Junk was optioned to AAA. We had some other transactions we didn't talk about short of the Black and Yelich changes. Obviously, Tobias Myers ended up getting optioned after his last start. The Brewers DFA'd Corbin Martin, who got claimed by the Orioles not long after. Kevin Herget got his 3 inning save and then was immediately sent down to AAA. And the Brewers traded for Mitch White for cash from the San Francisco Giants. So, just to give a little background on Mitch White, at one point, the second round pick of the Dodgers, boy, Colin Ray's getting squeezed right now. Second round pick of the Dodgers. White has a pretty good curveball and a pretty good slider. They both have interesting characteristics. They're not commanded great at the time, but at the moment, I should say. But they both have pretty good characteristics. The fastball is like 93, 94. It does not have very good characteristics. And I don't know. He's been hit pretty hard. He has not had great stats in the majors, but he does have prospect pedigree, which the Brewers seem to value a lot. They go after a lot of guys who are at 1 point pretty big prospects. JB Bukowskis is an example of that, actually. And for a guy like White, you're banking on figuring out the breaking balls and then making the fastball playable. So we'll see if they're able to do that, but we haven't seen him yet. He was only activated a couple days ago. We'll see. I'm sure we will see him soon. With the way Colin Ray is currently pitching, White is somebody who can give you some length, and Ray's at almost 50 pitches through 2 innings while I'm looking over at my screen right now. So maybe we'll see Mitch White by the time this has been released in the morning, but so far we haven't seen him, and it'll be interesting to see how the Brewers try to deploy him. But moving on to some other questions, we have some bigger picture questions. So I guess, Gunnar, I'll start with you on this one. How should we handle the lack of productivity amongst our young outfielders, meaning, well, I would say specifically Frelick and Churio as like the really young outfielders, but Perkins still relatively young. I think he's 27 right now, and he's obviously young in terms of MLB experience. So how would you be handling playing time for these three at the moment, or even, I mean, roster spot wise? What are we looking at? How would you go about handling all of that right now?
I'll start with the big fish with Jackson Churio. He obviously hasn't played very well recently. Now we haven't seen him a lot recently, at least as much as we would like to be seeing him. And I think I mentioned this to you over the week, but and maybe this goes into a different discussion really, but the Brewers are in a tough spot and do have to have some. It's hard to manage maybe the situation if you're Pat Murphy sometimes. Now, I don't think it's that hard, but I understand it because you're in first place. Um, and you want to compete and you want to do the best always. So you're always trying to put the best person you think that can win you the game out there. Um, but I think you also have to have this bigger picture in mind. Is I guess what we're calling these questions bigger pictures, but um, because with a guy like Jackson Churio, we assumed he'd be playing every day this season, regardless of what happens. He deserves to be playing. He has to play through these harder times that he's having at the plate now. Normally, you'd say, well, maybe you're giving him a break because he's struggling at the plate and whatnot. But I think, and you mentioned it was almost like a game that Pat Murphy was playing a little bit in one of those games in the past where he got the pinch hit opportunity or whatever, and he put him in a spot to succeed, and maybe gave him a big moment to learn. But then it wasn't really necessarily a great scenario for him just to get thrown into a game like that. And then have to work through it. But I just think that he needs to be playing through a lot of his mistakes, because it's going to play off in the long run. Now, again, he's not playing great right now, but I understand it. Maybe as a first place team, if you don't want to, you think that's not your best chance to win, but you just always have to keep the bigger picture in mind. But with Sal and Blake, I got to be honest, and I don't think we've had a bigger discussion about Sal on this podcast recently, but I just really do not like what I see out of Sal Frelick, really since he's been up. And I mean, honestly, everything that he's been hitting wise, every number, I try to look for some hope with him. And I talk about guys who like maybe make more contact and maybe guys that I don't necessarily love, but bring something different to the team that maybe I just need to accept more of because in the past we've struck out and all these other things. So I'm like, okay, well maybe Sal and Spencer has told me about his higher exit velocities in the minor leagues and all that. Um, so I think a combination of all those things, it's a little bit different of a player than I like, but a guy who hits the ball hard, maybe more on the ground, but makes a lot more contact, doesn't strike out as much. But right now he's not hitting the ball hard, not making great contact. Um, Really, I think he's probably our worst hitter right now. It seems like if I looked at the numbers, I looked at a lot of different numbers. I know Baseball Savant has um, peripheral wise, he's probably our worst hitter. Obviously not on paper, he's not, but um, they had some new stat where it's like a graph. I was talking about it with Spencer and I sent it to him, but you can look at a lot of different numbers really. Um, and I was looking at it. I got one pulled up right now, but they call it number of blasts is what they call it, which is basically like I assume like barrels or balls that you squared up pretty decently. Um, and weirdly enough, Blake Perkins is tied for third in our team with blasts with Reese Hoskins, which you wouldn't even think that's possible. But that's more of a product of what he was doing earlier in the season. But Sal is higher than Bryce Terang, which is funny, but um, I really don't like Bryce Terang at this point. Defensively, he's still decent. I would have to look at those numbers too, but seems like he's maybe fallen off a little bit in that category this year too, but
You mean
still
Frelick?
good. Frelick, yeah.
Okay, you
Um,
said Terang.
yeah, okay, but yeah, he's been fine, but defensively, I just think maybe he's taking a little bit more of a step back. But
Yeah,
I'm at the beginning of the season, I wanted him to hit the ball harder. We knew that was coming into the year in that sense that we needed to see that coming into the season. It's probably gotten even a little bit worse if you compare it to last season. So, um, yeah, I guess how to handle it in general with these three guys is we obviously have Garrett Mitchell coming back. That's not going to solve the problem. Maybe he's going to be the fourth guy in this list who you're going to have to decide what to do with. But um, Yelich is going to get moved to the outfield pretty soon. Jake Bauers, if he forces his way to play, can play the outfield too. Tyler Black, if it gets really bad, you can switch one of those guys out. Sal could go down, Tyler Black could come up. Who knows? But um, yeah, I just it is a difficult situation. I don't even have really a perfect answer outside of that. I think Jackson needs to play more. I think that's maybe the most obvious of how to handle it. And then with Blake, he's got excellent defense. So that's maybe the one thing where it's like, okay, if you want him to play the most because these guys all suck at hitting and he's the best at defense, I get it. But Spencer, how would you handle it with these three guys and maybe playing time wise, how would you handle it? Because like I said, you're kind of left with what you're left with right now. It's not like a different option you can go to.
regardless of options, Sal Frelick should be in AAA right now for me. And you know that's not. I mean, I've been a big Sal Frelick believer. You're not imagining things. Oh, did Reese Hoskins get hurt? Oh my God. Well, Tyler Black might be coming back soon. Um, anyway, he's been a horrible defender. He's in like the 18th percentile for range right now and outs above average. His arm's been fine. His sprint speed's good. He's getting terrible breaks. He was doing fine until that Ellie inside the Parker where he took a just an awful gamble on that one. And I feel like he has just completely gotten his head about jumps and reads off the bat and stuff. Now he's not going after anything hard. He's been really, really frustrating to watch. Like you said, yeah, Reese is leaving the game. Like you said, the bat has been terrible. I mean, it's just been awful. And I it sucks we can't see bat speed stuff going back to last year. They're starting it in 2024 and not anything before that. I feel like he's reaching and just trying to touch the ball even more than he already was, which was always going to be part of his game. Like, and in a way, it was supposed to be a good part of his game where he could protect the plate well, put the ball in play, use his speed, hit the ball where people aren't because he had really good bat control. It's been awful this year. Nothing he has done has been good. He should be in AAA, and there's absolutely zero reason for Churio to be sitting for him right now. It's inexcusable. There's no reason to be doing it. It's bad managing. It's not smart. There's nothing. There's no good reason for it. And it's really been annoying me. Sal Frelick is 24. He is not playing, he's not doing anything well. And Churio's 20, and he had to sit 4 games in a row outside of a pinch hitting opportunity in a huge spot. and then he has to come in and face a good pitcher when he does pitch. Like, just let him play through his mistakes. And it bothered me when Murphy said something along the lines of like, "Well, we have to teach people how to be accountable." It's like, yeah, you do. How about Oliver Dunn and Sal Frelick learn that lesson at some point? Like, why are we doing this to the 20-year-old? I get it. It's fine to be hard on him, to make him, as Sal Frelick takes a half swing at a pitch almost at his eyes. Um, he has been just horrific. He's been fine on the bases. That's the only good thing he has done this entire season. He should be in AAA, and I don't care if that means bringing up Brewer Hicklin. I don't care if it means Jake Bauers plays more outfield. Bauers has at least made the plays he should make so far. He's not a good outfielder, and I guarantee he's not going to grade out well. But whatever it takes to get him out of the lineup, he needs to be out of the lineup, and it should be in AAA where he's figuring things out and starting to figure out how to impact the ball with a little bit of an ability to do so, because there's just been nothing. It's been horrible. Yeah, I mean, he's hitting right now, so I'll give you the update on how terrible it goes in a minute. But it's been really frustrating for me because I do like Frelick. I wanted the Brewers to draft Frelick. I was a big fan of what he was doing in AAA, especially in 2022. I thought he was ready. He started 2023 bad, and he got hurt then, and there were a lot of reasons to believe that the thumb was a big part of the issue. But at this point, the thumb is not something he can use as an excuse anymore. It's healed. He's fine. So he's got to figure out how to put something behind the ball at times, and he's just not doing it right now. On the other side, you mentioned Perkins' defense. He needs to be in center most days. The Brewers just don't have another center fielder on the roster at the moment. Frelick would have been the guy, and he's not that guy right now. He's been terrible defensively. So I think Blake needs to play almost every day and play center field, even though he's struggling with the bat. Like you said, maybe Mitchell changes that a little bit when he returns, because regardless of what I think of the bat, I think there's more ceiling there with the bat. And yep, Frelick struck out, and he's as good a defender. Wait, maybe not even as good a defender. Perkins is legitimately one of the best defenders in baseball, but Mitchell has more upside with the bat, and he's a very, very good defender in center. So I think that could start to limit Perkins to more of a fourth outfield role, which is his best role overall. But yeah, it's Perkins and Cherio are the one who should be playing right now. It should not be Sal. Which again, I would not have imagined that coming into it. I actually thought he looked good in spring. We saw him impact the ball a little bit in spring. He was hitting some homers. He was doing a lot of good stuff in spring, and it is not carried over to the regular season at all. It's just I think he's completely mentally shook. That's what he looks like to me. Like somebody who, and this is always one thing that I worry about with prospects, and it was part of the reason Churio's slow start in Double-A last year really actually made me more excited for him, is that he started really slow and then he had a great finish to the season, especially July. I mean, he just mashed in July, but that was showing an ability to get through struggles. And Frelick never struggled in AAA. And the one time he did, he got called up afterwards. He never really got back to showing that he could bounce back from that. He never struggled in college. He never struggled in high school. This is a guy who was an easy D1 athlete in multiple sports, a guy who was going to be a first round pick after his first couple of seasons in college. There was never any having to go through struggles and bounce back from them. And I think we're seeing that where he's starting to slam helmets. He's starting to throw bats after he gets out, like stuff that players who are in a rut mentally do. And it's not something he does because he's somebody who's normally pretty upbeat and pretty like, you don't see that type of anger from him very often. So the fact we're seeing it more makes me think he's lost mentally right now. And that to me is the time you have to get him to AAA and let him work through stuff on a lower scale where there's not as much pressure on him to perform. Joey Ortiz, Blake, get on your horse. No, is he going? No. Double for Ortiz. Second and third for the Brewers right now. I'm watching. I'm sorry for everyone who's already going to know exactly what happened in this game, but yeah, we'll move on from that because we talked about that a lot. But we'll talk about the guy who really has been just fantastic this season, and that's William Contreras. And honestly, before we even talk about anything he's doing output-wise, I want to talk about the fact that he has not sat a game this year as someone who's catching. He's caught like 85%. He might have caught 90% of the game so far. I think he's only DH'd like 6 times. I have concerns about that in some ways because I think you need to get him off his feet a little bit more. Jake Bauers line out to right. But it's been really impressive the fact that he's able to go out there and do this every day. It's not normal for catchers to do this, especially now. He's on pace to catch like 140 some games, which is not, it's just not normal. People don't do that in baseball anymore. And like I said, I have my concerns about it holding up over the course of the season, but the output he's putting out right now, I mean, we've talked about him being like one of the best hitting catchers in baseball. I'm right now he's the one of the best hitters in baseball. It's not catching dependent anymore. Like he is one of the best hitters in all of baseball right now. I mean, he's seventh in weighted runs created plus. Is that right? Yep, seventh in weighted runs created plus. Uh, Ironically, the defense has actually taken a bit of a step back, I would say. He's not receiving the ball as well. Throwing wise, he's doing okay, but I almost wonder if he's a little too focused on the throwing part of it instead of the catching part of it in some ways. But we've already seen that he's capable of receiving well, and it's there's a pretty good chance he'll get back to some of that as the season moves along. But striking out under 20% of the time, you go to his baseball savant page, it's going to be a ton of red. It's just he's been fantastic. He's doing a lot of stuff well. There's still always going to be room for him to add some power numbers wise because he still doesn't elevate the ball a ton, but I do not want him to change his approach to try to get to that power. Like right now, hit the line drives and when you catch it out in front, it'll go out and that is a totally fine approach to have. You don't need to go chasing the extra home run power. I think it's something that might still just continue to come naturally to him as he gets more on time, as he gets used to that stuff more. But yeah, it's just been really, really good. And I'm looking at the Savant page now. The one thing is that his framing is in the second percentile, which is a humongous step back. He does have 3 steals as well. Obviously, the whole team's been pretty aggressive. He had 6 last year, so it's not like he's not capable of it. But he's blocking the ball fine. Like I said, he's caught stealing above average is in the 89th percentile, so the throwing has improved. But Gunnar, why don't you talk about the hitting a little bit? I mean, it's just been he's been so steady in the middle of the order.
Yeah, he's been excellent. And the one thing I was going to say negative is what you pointed out, which was the framing. Because if you think about what he did last season with the framing and just his defense in general, you combine that player with the offensive player right now, and I mean that's MVP worthy pretty easily.
Yep.
And now I saw another stat too, and this was before tonight's game. Hopefully, he gets a hit. Just started, but um, he got on base like 37 out of 40 times or reached base safely. And then you mentioned the other numbers where you go to his page, like you said, everything's 90 percentile or higher. And just offensively throughout the league, he's one of the highest up there in the league, top 10 probably offensively. So, sneakily, I use the word underrated for this question because it really does feel like he's very underappreciated in the league. Um, and that can go back to when we traded for him. I don't think a lot of people even knew how good of a hitter he was then. Obviously the defense was the question. Obviously that's why he got traded, but he's just always going to be probably underrated. But yeah, I was just say defensively, you bringing the point up too with how much he's actually caught on top of that. Um, Probably can tie that into a little bit of Gary Sanchez's health and whatnot. You can't really rely
Yeah,
on him to catch, but um, you would probably like to have a guy who can maybe catch a little bit more and to help him out a little bit. Especially if you can find a way to keep William Contreras in the lineup still with DHing more.
right.
Um, but the really not much to complain about with William Contreras. The trade we'll be talking about it for years. Um, was an absolute steal. And yeah, I mean, we got him for 3 or whatever more years. So I'm really, really excited about him. And yeah,
Yeah. I will say, Will, not Will. What's the old Brewers? Why can't I think of his name? The old Brewers beat reporter for The Athletic before Will Salmon, Robert Murray. Robert
yeah,
Murray was doing his like weekly podcast thing that he does, but it's all on video. And he was talking about how the Brewers were trying to trade Ruiz the moment that trade happened. Like they were always trying to flip Ruiz. That was part of the plan. They took him because they knew other franchises valued him, and they didn't have any future plans with him, but they knew that other teams did, and they basically took him as a trade chip that they knew they could at least stick out there to pinch run or play in small stints if needed that same season. So I actually think that makes the idea of including this portion of the trade with Josh Hader even more realistic or more reasonable to say, okay, I mean, this was the plan the whole time. They wanted to go this direction. They were going to trade Ruiz the whole time. So a lot of people have said, oh, well, they just got lucky and got bailed out by the A's and the Braves being dumb. And yes, they absolutely got bailed out by the A's being dumb. But it is more fair to say that like this is all part of the Hader trade because their entire plan was to move Ruiz for the best trade they could find. And they found a very, very good one. And now they do have a legitimate MVP candidate. And like you said, if the framing gets back to even close to where it's been and he continues to hit, I mean, we're asking a lot to have a 950 OPS for the whole season and a 171 rated runs created plus, but if it's even close to that and the framing picks up a little bit, he is an MVP candidate. And in the NL, one of the best candidates is currently a DH. And Shohei's incredible, but if you can combine a really good bat with defense, that gives you a little bit more pull, especially at this position. This is a very hard position to play over the course of a full season. Like, he's a very legitimate candidate right now. It's going to take a lot to be able to maintain that the whole season, but it's been an incredible start for him. And I mean, that trade, we saw Gasser's debut. We've seen what Ruiz was able to turn into. I mean, we haven't even mentioned Piamps in this conversation. One of our better relievers as well. In the end, as much as the Josh Hader trade, I know everyone's opinions on the Josh Hader trade at the time. I enjoyed it from the moment it happened, but in the end, I think we even mentioned it earlier with all the bullpen guys. The Brewers can find relievers. Finding relievers is not a problem for the Milwaukee Brewers. Finding impact players around them can be an issue at times, and they were able to do that potentially in the form of a starting pitcher in Gasser, somebody who throws more innings than Hader does. I mean, I saw one of my favorite Twitter accounts. He got reinstated to Twitter, I should say. Onabom got reinstated after getting suspended for a little while after pretending to be the Chicago Cubs official account. But he tweeted after Gasser's start, Robert Gasser with 6 shutout innings, or as Josh Hader calls it, 2 solid weeks worth of work. I mean that really is what you were getting from Hader at the end, if that. Like 6 innings in 2 weeks for Hader would have been a lot at the time we traded him because he was only going an inning. He was only doing it in save opportunities. Those don't come around that often. And as great as an elite reliever is and closer is, I'm still of the belief that if you can get legitimate impact or even potential impact for a reliever, you should do it. And that's why I would trade Devin Williams this offseason too. I would not go into the final season of Devin Williams with him on the Brewers. I would trade him for a package that seems like it could help us in a lot of ways. But that's beyond the point. I started getting on a rambling a little bit about the Contreras part of this, but I do think Brewer fans in general just sometimes have to trust. I'm going to use a Sixers phrase here, but trust the process a little bit. Like Matt Arnold and David Stearns, no longer obviously Stearns, but those two know what they're doing. They don't mess up very often. We're even kind of starting to see it with Bowers, where everyone hated that trade and wanted him cut a couple of weeks ago, and now it's looking like a guy. I mean, he's a well above average hitter currently for the season, and again, strikeouts, whatever. We got to figure that out. But the Brewers don't lose many trades outright. It's pretty hard to find many examples of it. The Orlando Arcia trade is ironically probably their biggest loss in a while because they just got nothing out of it. I still don't have any problem with trading him. And they obviously picked up Adames after trading him, which I would take Willie Adames over Orlando still, but they don't mess up very often. So sometimes it's okay to just trust them. Like they make a cash trade for Bryce Wilson last year and everyone freaks out. Guess what? Bryce Wilson is now starting and doing pretty well and also has been a very good reliever for a year and a month before that. They made a cash trade for Mitch White this week and everyone's like, what are they doing? Why? It's like, there's no risk here. And if they figure out the stuff with him, then they might have a guy they can use. Like there's no risk. Sometimes you guys just have to let things play out. It's okay. Just you can let it play out and see if it works. And if it doesn't, then maybe judge it. But even then, like I said, with a Mitch White trade, it's nothing. It's not going to hurt you if it doesn't work out. He might lose you a game, I guess, if he sucks in one outing or something. That's about as much as you're going to lose out of this. But back to happier things here. So Milwaukee has had since opening day, they've had the second highest postseason probability increase. So it went from 30% at the beginning to 65.8% currently. this is obviously somewhat meaningless. It's not really a true stat, or it's just based on algorithms and stuff that I don't even know where you grabbed this from, Gunner. Was it Baseball Reference or Fangraphs or who?
Just MLB Network posted it. I'm not sure where they got
Okay.
it from, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
But
not sure what they go off of.
either way, it's mostly a made up number. But I guess are you believing in this team as a postseason team? Is this something you have been considering the whole season? They're pretty much a postseason team, and it's just the national media starting to catch up to it, or where are you at with the Brewers in general right now, and how do you feel, I guess, about the team's chances to continue the success they've had early?
I feel like the national media is just maybe catching up a little bit because if I told you our top four hitters stats right now, you would, outside of maybe Yelich is the outlier, but he was also hurt for a while. But if I told you our top four hitters are going to be good, wow, okay, thank you, I knew that. If I told you our young guys are going to struggle a little bit, okay, that's a fair thing to assume. Bryce Terang maybe was the one guy who had a jump that you didn't expect.
Yeah.
Joey Ortiz a little bit of a jump. We thought he would be good, but otherwise, our other young outfielders and stuff haven't really performed. But so nothing crazy in offense that I didn't already expect. Pitching wise, we've actually been faced with a lot more hurdles than we expected. Um, but even so, I mean, our bullpen guys we already liked, and we knew that was going to be a strength coming into the year. It's been the starters that have been at least holding it the fort down a little bit. So I just don't think it's anything crazy that I've noticed. Obviously, this is going off of our standings and the other teams in our division. It seems like it's really just us and the Cubs that we have to worry about. But I say that in mid-May. Who knows what's going to happen? But still, I think it's all that stuff factors in. But it seems like we're getting a lot more maybe credibility recently. Um, but like I said, I don't know. I just haven't really seen anything like I'm just always excited about this team. I don't know. I just haven't really seen anything that I'm like surprised about or um like all of a sudden we're on the map now because of so and so did this and we're doing this unexpectedly. I mean maybe people didn't expect us to run as much this season. I guess that's maybe a little bit of a brand change with us, but that's even not so much of a brand change. It is something that maybe more we're identifying a little bit more. We're like top three in steals. Um, but I just can't think of anything that would make us like turn people's heads that we've seen so far. It's just what maybe I've expected. But um, what do you think?
Yeah, I said going into the season that I think it's an 85, 87, somewhere in that range type of team win-wise. Um, I mean, I always felt 90-ish was a possibility, and I think that's probably more, I would feel a little bit more confident in saying that they could win 90 games, and I still think that wins the Central. The Cubs are not a bad team by any means, and I do think they have a good manager, unfortunately, but I also think that that gets the job done. Contreras got a hit, so there you go. Um,
Yes, 38 in a row, or out of 41.
yeah, he the bat. Wow, he broke his bat, and the handle stuck to his hand with his hand open all the way down to first base. That was pretty cool. Um, but no, in terms of, I don't see much different from what I saw at the beginning of the year. Like you said, I think, was I expecting Contreras to turn into like a top 10 hitter in baseball so far? No, but I thought he was going to be really good. Getting the version of Yelich we've gotten so far has definitely helped, but he's also only played 15 games so far. So it's not like you've gotten huge production out of him. He's missed more games than he's played in at this point in the season. Obviously, very helpful when he has been in there. And then, yeah, like you said, I mean, Terang's the one guy who kind of jumped up and has given production that you just were not expecting. And I would say on the flip side, for me, Frelick has given me a lot less production than I would have been expecting coming into the year. So that kind of evens those two out. And then the rest of it's been mostly what you would think. I mean, we knew Reese was going to give us power. We knew Sanchez could give us power. We knew Bowers was capable of hitting for power. Um, and Willie's been off to a good start. We're getting the good version of what we've seen from Willie. He's striking out a lot less this year so far, which has been really good to see. Um, Last year, it felt like Willie had a lot of holes in his swing. This year, it's kind of, he gets by at the top of the zone. He has not been good. But if you make a mistake, Yelich with a single as well. Um, we, you don't really get it back from Willie this year. And we had the 3-run homer against Kansas City to win that game, but he's hit a lot of balls hard. He had the 3-double game the other day, like I mentioned. You just haven't gotten many surprises. I would say, I guess Ortiz is probably, I was really high on Ortiz, but I wasn't necessarily expecting this type of production right away. But again, all of this kind of feels like it's evening out for the free leg production that you're not getting. And yeah, I mean, the pitching stepped up through a lot of problems so far. I mean, they've already had 10 different starting pitchers, true starting pitchers, not openers, nothing like that. Nobody else has had more than 8 in MLB so far, and the Brewers have already had 10. And they've just been able to battle through it and keep getting the job done. And like you said, the pen guys have stepped up, and as always, kind of unknown pen guys have stepped up, and it's going really well. So I don't know. I think
I should say, not to cut you off, but maybe the only other thing that we didn't touch on was defense. And I think
that's actually
people always just assume that we're good at defense, which we
yeah.
are. We are still doing good, but I think we've even got more room for improvement than we
Yes.
even have. I mentioned Sal Frelick, way below than what he normally should be. Just adding Reese Hoskins and having him play first base is going to be horrendous, which we already have counted or accounted for. You mentioned that he's hurt in this game. Maybe our defense will get better now by addition by subtraction, but not a trade I'm willing to make,
No.
unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I think just in general, like we've navigated pitching with maybe a little bit worse of a defense and still a lot of room to grow in defense. I think we're still going to be
Yeah.
excellent. We still have been fine, but yeah, I just think there's still room to grow in defense.
No, that you're right. The defense has been probably it's just been more average than like great. And I was still expecting it to be pretty great. Even Contreras' portion of that, like the framing we talked about, he
Hmm.
just isn't the same as he was last year. And Gary's not a good defender. He's way worse than he's been the last couple of years. He has not started well, but like you mentioned, he's barely caught, and we talked about he's barely caught. So it's kind of hard to get into a rhythm defensively too when you're only catching once a week max. Um, so yeah, I mean, a defense is definitely something I'm going to be watching. It feels like the thing that could make a jump, and then all of a sudden you are just in a really, really good spot because the pitching doesn't have to carry as much of a load as they have been so far. But yeah, I mean, that's that's where I'm at right now. I do think in terms of national media, I have to say, I saw a clip the other day. I can't remember what show it was on MLB Network, but it was basically them just going like, every single year we put the Brewers like third or fourth in the division when we do our preseason predictions, and every single year they finish top two. Like we might need to make an adjustment and start believing in the Brewers. And it's like, yes, you probably do. I don't understand how it happens every year. I get it, like early on, it was a different formula than most teams were using. So I get that it could be tough to believe in, or maybe you thought it was fluky for a couple years. The Brewers know what they're doing. They put out a good amount of talent every year. They play, I mean, this year it's just scrappy baseball, a lot of it, but also just they know how to win games, and that's a real thing. I believe in that teams and players know how to win games and believe in themselves winning games. And we've seen comebacks down to their last strike with the Willie Adames homer, the Reese Hoskins battle for a 3-run homer. We've seen them able to just every good team has those moments. And I know some people are like, well, that's just luck. Like, no, it's not. Teams know how to win and they figure out ways to win. So um, I think this team's good. I don't know if they're great. I don't know that it's a complete team right now, and I don't know that it's the team they're going to have once the deadline passes. I think if the Brewers are still competing like they are, that Arnold's going to go out and try and make some moves because the pitching is the one area where I think he's probably going to look and try and find like a more steady starting pitcher than what they have at the back end right now. But Gunnar threw in a question here. I'm going to lead into it. It'll probably sound a little weird because I'm asking myself, but he asked in the rundown we got here. He said, Spencer, how excited should we be about Mike Boeve? So, for anyone who knows me and followed me during the draft season last year, Boeve was one of the guys that I specifically called out wanting the Brewers to pick. I kind of felt like he was somebody the Brewers were going to pick because of just he had a lot of the traits that the Brewers look for in picks. Smaller school guy who hit the ball harder than his power numbers would show. And this is something I hadn't even put together, and somebody mentioned it to me. I can't remember who, but he played at Nebraska Omaha, and they have very weird dimensions, and it's really hard on lefties. So it's pretty hard to hit one out there as a lefty. So that certainly was not helping his power numbers because we saw a pretty big exit velocity. Exit velocity's thrown up there for him, but he just wasn't able to put the ball out. And in the minors so far, I mean, he's mashing. He struggled at high A last year when he made it there. Gunnar and I actually went and saw him, and I think he probably had his worst game of the entire season that day. He had 3 strikeouts, and I think he had like a broken back grounder on the other plate appearance. It was a rough showing for sure, but he returned there to start the season, and over the course of his 13 games, he put up a 254 weighted runs created plus, an OPS of almost 1,300 without any homers, but numerous doubles. Um, he struck out at a 9% clip and he walked at a 25% clip, which is absolutely absurd. So he got moved to double A very quickly, proving that, okay, I'm not high A was an adjustment for me last year, but I'm good. I'm ready for double A right now. And since he's went there, he has an OPS of 931, weighted runs created plus of 180. Strikeout percentage is now 16 and a half and an 8.8% walk rate. So that has flipped a little bit, but we have seen a homer. He's had 3 triples down there already. He's hit a bunch of doubles. He is just mashing, and he hasn't really slowed down. He's had a couple like 1 for 4 games recently, I think, but he's really, really hit at the double A level too. And I always believed in the bat. He's playing a really good third base when he's there. Brock Wilken is now back and also playing a lot of third base. So he's played some first base and some second base. I think on the Tyler Black scale, I think he's much more likely to be able to stick or to be able to handle like second and third base, which makes him an interesting utility player because I think he could play almost every infield spot. And I do think the bat's going to play. This is a guy who could be up. If you told me he was up this season, I'd be surprised, but not shocked. And I think he's up next season, barring injury. Honestly, I think he's going to hit enough to be up next season, regardless. I really believe in the bat. It's a guy who walks. It's a guy who doesn't strike out a ton, but he impacts the ball. He has hit the ball over 110 miles per hour. He's not a guy who. It's not Sal Frelick. It's closer to Black. I would say, honestly, I might believe in the pure bat a little bit more than Tyler Black. Tyler Black adds an element of speed that Boeve does not have at all. But it's a very similar prospect to Tyler Black overall, I think. I think there's a little bit better glove. I think Black hits for more power overall, but that Boeve might be a little bit more of a pure hitter. And then Black has the advantage in the speed, like I said. But this is a guy I really believe in. He's only 22 at double A mashing. They might push him to triple A. Wilken might follow not soon. Wilken and him could both get pushed pretty quickly, I think. That would not be surprising. And obviously, it's going to be hard to find spots for them this year, depending on injuries and stuff. But if there's health issues down, I mean, we already just potentially lost Hoskins. I don't know what's up with that. So that could change some things too. But depending on health at the major league level, it wouldn't shock me to see either of those guys. And yeah, I would be excited about Boeve if I were you guys. And I am very excited about him myself. Just really big believer in the bat. And even when he struggled at high A last year, it was basically a league average hitter. He just wasn't doing what I was kind of expecting him to. But coming from a small school and seeing pro ball pitching, it's a pretty big adjustment. You don't see guys at Omaha. They faced like Tennessee once. They faced Kansas once, a couple other big schools once. But for the most part, you're going to see guys throwing in the low 90s with a decent breaking ball at his level. So seeing guys that all of a sudden consistently you're seeing 95, 96 and a good breaking ball, it's an adjustment period. And he had it, but he clearly got through it pretty quickly. So, Gunnar, I don't know if you've had a chance to see any of him lately or if you have any thoughts on Boeve before we wrap this up with our random Brewers.
I've seen a little stuff. Obviously, he's hitting for a lot more power, which I remember. I'm a sicko, and I remember maybe if you want to call it our fan mail early on when we started this podcast in the off season, and someone had a question of like, should we be concerned about Mike Boeve because he didn't hit for any power in his small sample and single A or whatever it was, low A, high A. And yeah, we went to go watch him and everything like that. I like his swing and whatever. It's just I remember us saying like, don't be concerned at all about that. Um, I guess technically he's a little older. But you said small school and all that. Still only 21, 22. So it's not like I was super worried about it. But yeah, I mean, if the power never comes around, then yeah, maybe a little bit more nervous because then you're looking at we had another Sal Frelick and we just have so many of these guys who don't show much power, but another guy was a similar profile, but just like Tyler Black, as you mentioned, guys, all of a sudden you get a little power in that swing. What they're already doing, guys, when they walk and just have good hitting profiles in general, well, then they take off a lot. So I'm excited. I honestly I didn't forget about Brock Wilken too, but I mean that's another bat that we got to look out for this year. But if you're telling me Mike could be up this season too, or even early as next year, I mean that'd be pretty exciting. I didn't expect you to say that at all. So yeah, I mean that could probably lead us into our random Brewers, which we're back doing. So Spencer, I'll make you go first this time because my answer was based off of what you wrote down. So who did you pick for your random Brewer?
I went with the first Shohei Ohtani. Not really the first. There was Babe Ruth and everything, but Brooks Kieschnick, the Brewers Shohei. I'll say the Brewers Shohei. We got our two-way player. Brooks Kieschnick was honestly he was a really big prospect when he was drafted and stuff because of his ability to hit and to pitch at Texas back in the day. And he was on the Brewers, and I honestly don't remember watching him a ton. I know he was fun to watch, but he really didn't have great results for the Brewers. He hit a couple homers. He did pitch. He did okay as a pitcher, but it wasn't great. But the biggest thing for me is that I personally got to work with Brooks Kieschnick when I was, I believe, 4 or 5 years old. Um, my dad won a radio contest. I got to work with Wes Helms on grounders, Butch Weiniger, the Brewers hitting coach at the time, on hitting, but I was swinging major league bats as a 5-year-old, so that didn't really help me much, I don't think, on hitting. I could barely put that thing up above my shoulder. And then Brooks Kieschnick taught me how to pitch in the Brewers bullpen, and I have a picture of Brooks Kieschnick tying my shoe in the Brewers bullpen. So I've tweeted that before. I'll put it under the tweet when we put this episode out, but Kieschnick even replied to the tweet and was like, "Oh, I kind of remember this actually." So that was cool. But he seemed like a really cool dude, really fun profile. I think he probably would have done a little bit better in modern baseball. One of those guys who might have got more of a real opportunity to do both if he had come up through this current day and age because of a guy like Shohei. But not the best MLB player. One of the most legendary college players, though. Like for people who followed college baseball at that time, they all talk about Brooks Kieschnick and how he was leading that Texas team to, I don't know if they won the College World Series, but I know they did really well and that he was a really big part of that. So, Gunnar, it looks like you chose a similar named player. So, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I saw your name, and then all of a sudden, the second I saw Brooks Conrad came into my head. So, I remember Brooks Conrad, no batting gloves. That's the first thing that I remember for sure. I remember he either had some big moments with the Braves, or he had a couple of good seasons with the Braves. I know he didn't play a ton, but I guess looking it up, I did pull it up. Let's see what he had. 750 OPS with them. Yeah, he had one good season, not a ton of at bats, but. Yeah, he must have had some nice pinch hitting opportunities or whatnot. Maybe like a Mike Brasso, if you want to relate it to a modern day player.
Yeah.
Small sample, but some good results. Yeah, I don't. He played horrible for us. He had 4 hits or 3 hits, so not a ton of memories with him. I just strictly remember him looking um, like a Midwesterner guy who just picked
Oh,
up a
yeah.
bat and he was just born to play baseball. That's all I remember about him, really. But
Yeah.
um,
He
do you have any
screamed
Brooks?
farmer.
Yeah, well, I didn't know if that was offensive. That was honestly the first word that came into my head. Do you have any Brooks Conrad memories, or that's all?
I remember him being
You had the
like,
no batting gloves, so did you take it after
oh,
Brooks
yeah.
Conrad?
He wasn't the reason I went no batting gloves,
Okay.
but he played a role. No, but I mean, I remember him really well. I just started looking up Kieschnick's stats here quickly because in 2003, he only had 76 plate appearances. He was mostly a pinch hitter for the Brewers, obviously. Um, but he hit 7 home runs in that time. He had a 970 OPS. Like he didn't hit super well the next year. I think they actually tried playing him in the outfield. No, he still only hit as a pitcher at that time and as a pinch hitter. Um, Actually, the year before, he played a little bit of left field. That's what it was. But either way, he didn't hit great that year. He had 1 homer. He had 689 OPS, but just a fun player. And then, yeah, for Conrad, I remember on MLB The Show, or not MLB The Show, it was actually MLB 2K, 2K8 when I was playing it. Um, Brooks Conrad was like a somewhat big, like he had a decent amount of potential. So I would play that game later on and always put him on the Brewers because I was like, oh yeah, this is a guy that was on the Brewers for a few days basically. I guess 25 games with the Brewers, but yeah, he was like I want to say a pretty big prospect for the Astros coming up, if I remember. Yeah, that's who it was. I don't know if he got traded to the A's. I mean, he was 28, I guess, when he debuted, so he was probably just like a minor league free agent or something, and then found his
Damn, he had
way to the
monster minor league numbers. Where did this home run power come from?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He had some 20 homer seasons. He had a 15 triple season. That's insane. Wow,
Damn.
we're going so long on this. This is going to be like our longest episode. Um, but yeah, he had a 14 triple season and a 15 triple season in the minors. I would not have guessed that. Did he steal bases in the minors or something? Yeah, he had 20 steals in a season. He had a 2020 season in 2005 for Houston's, well, between Double A and Triple A. But wow, yeah, he. I wonder he was like Hunter Morris of the
Oh,
Astros probably, where it's like an older
yeah.
guy who was dominating competition and everyone got excited about him, and then he wasn't actually that great. But he did have a couple. He had a nice season for the Braves, like you said. 177 plate appearances, 811 OPS. That's not bad. Hard to complain with that. So, yeah, Brooks Conrad,
Sure.
Brooks Kieschnick. If your name was Brooks and your last name started with a K, we loved you. Thank you for your thank you for what you did for the Brewers. You're the best. All right, we got to wrap this up. This is taking way too long. For those of you who somehow made it through all of that, please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on. Remember to follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod. Please feel free to leave feedback for us on how we can get better. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time.
Cool crew.